Well, welcome everyone. My name is Sarah Pearson, and I'm the assistant conductor for the Symphony of Northwest Arkansas. And I also want to welcome SoNA Singers Director Terry Hicks. Welcome, Terry.
Hello, hello. Good to see you.
Yeah, so good to see you. So excited that we're meeting together. We are here talking about Inside the Music for our final Masterworks coming up on April the 6th at Walton Arts Center. We're having a concert featuring Ode to Joy. And
Yes.
primarily that is focusing on Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. And we are so excited about that. We get to bring the SoNA singers in, guest soloists, and it's just going to be a powerhouse.
Yeah,
It's one of those that I've looked forward to since we announced it last season. And like, it's just one of those that, I don't know, so exciting. And
it is.
generally, we do have one other work on the concert. It's by one of our Latin composers, but we're primarily going to be focusing on Beethoven tonight. So I want to get started. One of the reasons that we picked talking about Beethoven and featuring him on this final Masterworks is it's a big anniversary. Did you know, Terry, that May 7th, 1824 was the premiere of Beethoven's Ninth?
Yeah, coming up on 200 years.
Yeah, it's crazy. You know, he actually started writing it in 1817, like the beginning sketches and kind of
Right.
teetered and did some other works in between there. But then he came back to it in like 1822, 23, but it
Yep.
didn't premiere until like Vienna in like 1824, like May 7th.
Right.
So,
And he went through hundreds of ideas
yeah.
with for the tune to the Ode to Joy, for the words for the Ode to Joy.
Yeah, I was going back through. I have this really cool book. I thought about bringing it here, but I figured it'd be a little over the top. But it's this huge book, and it's full of treatises. Treatises are like original manuscripts, documents, if people don't know what those are. But there were sketches of Beethoven's Ninth as he was working on it, and he was so full of doubt on what he wanted to do, even up to like weeks and months prior. We're not so sure he even wanted to include a chorus on the fourth movement, which is
Right.
interesting because that's kind of the driving force of this piece. But before we talk about the fourth movement, because that's really like the culminating moment, and that's where SoNA singers really will shine. But I want to talk a little bit about the first three movements because that really ties us into where we're going into the final movement of the Ode to Joy. Beethoven and the opening movement of this, I wanted to read a quote. I wrote this down and I thought this is really powerful. He was reviewed by newspaper writers from Leipzig. They said the symphony has no need of comparison. You know, so many composers were fearful of being compared, or even Beethoven of his previous works. But it said it was showed such originality from the very first movement to the final movement that everything was new and it had never existed before. So it was like it was something like he just opened up this whole new world. So I'm like,
Right.
yeah.
And what's so incredible again is he was profoundly deaf
Mm.
at this point. He had been going deaf for decades before that, but this he was deaf when he wrote this, completely deaf.
Yeah, and I think that's where the human condition comes in on this Ninth Symphony, because people can relate to people when you are going through tragedies or trials, that it makes you more relatable. If everything's going great, then it's hard to have that voice of like, okay, well, I guess you understand, you know. But Beethoven really did. He, at the age of 28, started to go deaf, and then by the time that he had gotten to his Ninth Symphony, he couldn't hear any of it. I think
Right.
there's a story. I mean, obviously, I read so many books, you know, but one of them came up that there was a soloist, I think, on stage for the night that when he conducted it, even though he was totally deaf, that he got to the end of the piece and he was still conducting, and she turned him around and to show him that the audience was applauding because he didn't know. But in
Exactly.
my mind's ear, he was still conducting. True to form, I guess, for conductors that were
Oh yes, keep going.
Yeah. So I want to talk just a little bit about the first, the second, and the third movement, and then we'll just kind of dive into the fourth because it is just full of incredible stuff. So the first movement, within the first like 30 seconds, you get a huge dramatic, like cohesive voyage. Like you get your
Right.
them, you get your tonality and your melody. Beethoven wastes no time with that. And immediately you hear that harmonics happening through. And he does a really cool thing. He brings back from ancient times the open fists. And I know some
Mm,
of our patrons maybe not all be musicians, but it's like this idea of mysterious, like this like what's going to happen, like this unveiling of this drama. And he does an incredible job of taking us on this musical journey in this first movement, setting up an atmosphere.
yep.
And then he dives into the second movement, which is really interesting. A fact, I don't know, you may know, you probably know this, I'm sure, but the first time that he uses the timpani up to this point, the timpani is the kettle drums, if you're not familiar, in the back of the orchestra, usually either on the right side or the left side of the stage. But the first time that it also played the melodic on top of
Yep.
the opening of the violin one. So they'll go dee da da, dee da da, and then
Yep.
it will go dee da da down low. And it was the first time that this had been used, and it was also in the second movement a scherzo. Typically, a scherzo would happen in your third movement. So
Right.
Beethoven was changing all the rules. He was like,
Yep.
no rules, there's no box. And
And
so,
it's this constant battle between light and dark,
yeah, exactly.
and the way that he changes keys to bring out that idea between the major and the minor tonalities to this battle of joy.
Yeah, it was almost, it's almost the human condition, that battle we were
Yep.
talking about, how that he struggled so much with coming to the realization of this impending darkness of this. I'm going to be in, and as a musician, that's almost like unheard of to understand. Like
Right.
it'd be like losing your sight after having it all your life, and I'm sure we have people and friends that will listen to this that have experienced that, and so they
Right.
can relate in that way to Beethoven. He just did some amazing things, and I one of my dear mentors, Joanne Fletta, did an incredible talk on this once, and she was just talking about how, and it's so true, and it's so many have recognized this, but he changed the world of everyone coming forward after that, even for the orchestras.
Yes.
Their orchestras formed because they wanted to play Beethoven symphonies. They had to have a hall or a place to do it, and he made the job for myself and for like Paul and other and Terry
Yeah.
a need for conductors to be able to keep it together, because there were so many
Yeah.
layers to his music to be able to make it cohesive and really tell a story. Then he takes us into more like the third movement. It's more of a conventional, like what you would recognize in one of Beethoven's symphonies. It's like a melting of like lovely, like yearning of where he's taking us into the fourth. Like it's like complementary two themes happening over and over. But it's, I think it sets up the moment that we're going into in the fourth movement. It
Right.
prepares your ear for what's coming of the Ode to Joy. You'll hear snippets of it, like fragments of it happening throughout. I think it, in some ways, it, by changing up and what he was doing with the symphony, of everything being new, just like the reviewer has said, that it was liberating, it was free for him, that he was no longer confined to what
Right.
gone through time up until we're at that point in time of the box and the rules that everyone had. I think this was really exciting. So then
Definitely.
we lead into the final movement. And this is where I would love you to be able to talk about how monumental this is.
Oh,
And
just the idea of adding chorus to symphony. I mean, this had not been done before. This major work, adding a chorus to it. I mean, what was he thinking? And I just love. I like to think that there's an opening baritone
yeah,
that cuts through. It's got this really kind of cacophonous, lots of energy, and big strong entrance, and then all of a sudden it stops, and
yeah,
and then there's this voice that just comes through. And in the research that I've done, they're not sure where the first three lines come from, and they believe that it might come from Beethoven himself. And I'm looking at the translation right now, and it's,
yeah.
"Oh friends, not this music." So it's a comment on all that craziness. And he says, "Oh friends, not this music. Let us strike up something more pleasant and more joyful."
Mm.
And then it moves in. It's just cool, really cool, exciting.
Yeah, and and I'm sure you know this, that so many times, like anytime that there's been a time of like war or peace or celebration, this fourth movement is often used. I think Bernstein, he performed it when the Berlin Wall
89.
fell. Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah,
Eight.
and often it's performed because it talks about the brotherhood of man. And like you're just talking
Yep.
about in the music, it's like a storm at the beginning. And then
Yep.
the lyrics talk about like what you were just saying, that there's this peace and this is not what it's all about. It's about this joy of brotherhood.
Yep. Yeah, when the chorus gets into the text and you hear the word Bruder, that's brother.
Yes.
And and in the German, it's not brother like good friend of mine, it's sibling,
Yeah.
which much more weight to that word.
Yeah, it's more profound. Like you think about
Yes.
your loved ones. I mean, we love our friends and but you mean think about the love that you have for those that you're so connected with, that you've grown up with, and that's what
Yes.
he's talking about. Even for Beethoven, I mean, early on he took over taking care of his nephew, right? Because his family, you know,
Yep.
had
I
passed
forgot
away.
about that. Yep.
Yeah, and so he had maybe from his own heartache and from his own, life, that those he came to those words. I think it
Yeah.
was later on in his life that he was described at times of being, in the kind of chaotic in his personality to being just, incredibly loving. And I think that that just goes back to the human condition of the things that he was struggling with. But you hear that in
Right.
the music and the battle. But in the end, the joy wins out. So as you're preparing the chorus for this, Terry, I mean, obviously here in this fourth movement, it's massive. We have an entire full orchestra playing on stage. We have four guest soloists, our solo soprano, alto, tenor, and bass, but we also have a powerhouse of a choir, SoNA
Yeah.
singer. How do you go about approaching this kind of a work? Not only is it one of the most famous ones in the canon, and but it's not in their mother tongue, it's in German, it's not
In
in
German.
English. So maybe you could talk a little bit about what that looks like for as our guests are going to be coming, and maybe they didn't know that they're going to be singing in German versus English.
Well, the first thing we do is we split into sections. And I have some section leaders that we go over the markings and we go over a number of things together. And then they spend time with each of their individual sections. And once we have some of the movement down, then we come together and put it all together. And we go over all of the German unification of all the vowels and of course all the cutoffs and entrances together. And so it just continues to grow and grow because this is about a 15-minute or so movement, and so there's a lot of German in here, and it is repeated at times, and it's just it's such a challenging piece, and the German is just one hurdle, but the range of the piece is such a struggle, and so we work on that in our individual sections, and like I said, and we bring it back together, and then eventually we run the whole thing.
Yeah. It's like you're working on all the pieces separately and then you bring it all together and it's this glorious moment. And it's like very rewarding. I always tell the musicians to love the process as much as the end result. And I know that the singers, when they all finally put it together, are like, ah, that's it. Right.
Exactly.
Oh, that's so amazing. So when we come together with the orchestra in just a couple weeks getting ready, maybe we could talk just a little bit about that. Have you talked with your singers what to expect in their ears? Because they've been rehearsing with the pianist, I'm sure. So to get used to how
Yes.
transitions, maybe how do they find their notes? Is this something that they've memorized, or maybe just what that looks like for someone that doesn't know anything about how that looks?
Gotcha. Yeah, we trying to give them, I of course give them some listening examples to listen to so they can get ideas of the musicality that I'm looking to pull from them.
Yeah.
But I have to remind them, guys, at this point, you're going to have the full brass section underneath you. We have got to make sure that we're hitting all of our and T's and everything so that they can understand words if they speak German. But if we're going to be heard, we've really got to cut through. And so I do talk to them about those moments when we have the full orchestra. And then there's other moments, again, where they're supposed to be singing so quietly,
Oh,
but
yes.
way up in the stratosphere. I mean, they're singing about the stars and the celestial body and that sort of thing. But they're supposed to be doing it on pianissimo, so really quiet, way up high, and that is so difficult. So yeah, I say, all we have are strings right here at this moment, so they have to understand the whole the end production when
It's
we're
really
working.
important that you brought that up. Beethoven was all about colors, tone colors and rhythms and harmonies. And yeah, so not only was it a tough moment for singers, but even for strings, to be, right there and, tonal center. But the whole fourth movement definitely is the marker for most vocalists to be able to sing, because it is definitely stretching them from
Yes.
sopranos to basses on what they're singing. Um, what do you think, maybe you can think about it for musicians to listeners, what do you hope that they take away from this experience?
Not to be too trite, but the joy that is such when the chorus gets to that final stretch and they are just going just 100 miles an hour, and that just pure joy hopefully is leaping out of their mouths and off that stage from all the musicians for our audience.
Yeah, I always say it's like you get those music bumps, that those chills. It just like it all comes together and it just resonates with you. And we hope that even our patrons that are coming, that you get to experience this. There's nothing like a live concert. I mean, you
uh,
can, of course, we've shared here on Inside of the Music examples of Beethoven's Symphony Number 9 that you can follow along with on the score. But being there live to be able to experience this true joy and brotherhood together, it's you can't put in a price tag on it or a word.
no,
I don't know if that makes
no,
sense.
yeah, it's just pure joy and pure beauty.
Hmm. Yeah. So what do you think you would give as an advice on people that are coming, how to prepare, or who should they bring people with them to invite to come with them? What would you tell them in preparation, and like what to listen for? What, as a singer, like what is your most favorite moment in the fourth movement as singers that you're like, oh, you should listen to this part, or listen for this moment to happen?
Oh, definitely. I mean, this is the kind of piece that speaks to so many people. If they're like, I'm not into classical music or whatnot, this one is gonna get you. This one's gonna bring them in.
Yeah.
And as far as the words go, there's a word that keeps coming back. Of course, it's Freude, and
Yeah.
that's joy. And that's what I keep pushing at. But another word is Elysium, and which is basically the idea of heaven. So, and I love the idea that this is for every this the text is for every human being. And that's what I love so much about it. If people take a moment and just research on the translation,
Yes.
um, it will mean so much more to them because they'll see that it is for every human being to come together and celebrate the human condition and just celebrate it together and just abundant joy.
Yeah. And I think Beethoven, at the end of his life, having gone through so many challenges, he was, truly loved by the people around him. I mean, at his funeral, he had thousands, right? Where like Mozart, who, had been so, at the same time frame, just not very many people there.
Right.
So, I mean, we know that he was loved, and obviously by his music, we could tell definitely here in his night. I like the statement that he said. Beethoven said his moral and religious intentions was to reveal the power of joy to bring mankind together and to show that it is rooted in the divine. And then that really lines up with what you're talking about, from the heavens to the stars and the mankind. And I think that that's just incredible as we look at this piece, and we're finishing out the season, and in a world that is torn by so many things, that for an evening we can come into the concert hall and experience joy and
Yes.
and peace. I think that's just so exciting, and not only that, but some of the most incredible music that has been written up to this time, and even to this day, because it's still a
Yes.
kind of the ruler that so many composers and conductors and musicians alike attain to, they
Right.
strive to get to do.
Yeah,
Well,
and this one, Paul's gonna be sweating by the time he gets to the end of this one. I mean,
well, you think about it, the fifth movement was up until that point, like original LPs, they back when recordings started happening, they based it off the length of Beethoven's Fifth
yep,
Symphony, right? And
yep,
then then we look at Beethoven's ninth. His ninth, it could go, it depends on the tempos, and obviously there's
right,
critical additions and musicologists that argue about one way or the other about those. So it can vary from anywhere from like 48 minutes to like 72. I
right,
know exactly what ours will look like. Hopefully we'll be kind of in the median there. But it also depends on how many what repeats you take, don't take.
right.
But no matter what, it's going to be a glorious night of
Yes,
just beautiful music. And I love that too. I think that the conductor has that freedom to be able to interpret what they think Beethoven wanted. And the metronome, if you're not a musician, a metronome helps kind of gauge the tempi of the piece. And Beethoven had just been really developed and not really solidified, and he
right,
started to go deaf, and so that's part of the reason that there's kind of questions whether or not some of his
right.
tempos are exact, because they're really fast or maybe behind, kind of thing. But it'll definitely be a workout for Paul no matter what in this one for any of us. But we're so
Definitely.
excited and so grateful for your work with SoNA Singers, Terry, for
Oh,
being
thank you.
with us. And I know that they have to be excited. Have they shared with you their excitement on it?
Oh, they are incredibly excited. Incredibly.
Yeah.
I can't wait.
Well, they're just fantastic, and every time that they come to stage, we're just so thrilled to have them. They're just so beyond ready and just make the whole experience wonderful. So we thank you for taking time to talk to to me and to our patrons on Inside the Music, and we look forward to seeing every one of you coming up on Saturday, April the 6th. And if you want to come early, we have our pre-concert talk. It's at 6:30 p.m. And then our concert starts at 7, correct? Is it 7 or 7:30?
I think it's 7:30, but I
I
can't
think it's
remember.
7:30. I just had one of those moments like, whoa, it's been a long day. It's 7:30, I'm pretty sure it is, because we always have a half-hour break. But we're super excited about this, and hope to see all of you there. And
Yes,
this is our final edition for this season on Inside the Music. We'll be together obviously for the 4th of July, but this has been a wonderful season, and what a great way to go out celebrating
yes.
the 200th anniversary of Beethoven's Ninth, coming up here in just a few weeks. So thank you, Terry. We
You
appreciate it.
bet.
All right, we'll see you soon. Bye, everyone.